What happens when a polished daytime host tries to keep it civil, and a royal who renounced the palace brings the palace attitude anyway? What began as a soft-focus interview on the Tamron Hall show detonated into a studio-stopping clash, the kind that turns warm applause into stunned silence. Today, we revisit the moment a conversation about healing became a duel about pride, power, and public truth, and ended with a royal storming toward the exit while an anchor finally lost her cool. The camera floated across the audience like a tide of light, catching nervous smiles and glossy coffee cups before settling on the glossy desk and the host who owned it. Tamron Hall sat poised, the picture of daytime composure. Shoulders square, eyes bright, palms open in welcome. She kept her voice low and warm, the kind that makes people confess without quite realizing they're doing it. "Your Royal Highness, Prince Harry, thank you for being here," she said, the faintest wink diffusing the formality. "We're honored." Harry entered to generous applause, that familiar half-smile tilted like a shield. Tailored suit, unhurried walk, a nod that suggested he was granting the room permission to breathe. He shook Tamron's hand as if the handshake were a favor. When he sat, he adjusted his cuff and scanned the crowd with the cool confidence of someone used to rooms bending. "Pleasure's mine," he said, always happy to help elevate the conversation. The first questions were gentle, and Tamron phrased them with care. The Foundation's newest initiative, a veterans program he'd piloted, a docu-series about resilience. Harry's answers were polished and expansive, more keynote than conversation. He spoke about cultural shifts and legacy systems, and the alchemy of telling one's truth. The audience nodded, lulled by the cadence, the shine. Tamron smiled. "You've used your platform to speak openly about mental health. What moment, specifically, made you realize you had to go public?" Harry's smile cooled a degree. "I wouldn't reduce it to a moment," he said, picking lint that wasn't there from his knee. "It's a continuum. I've always understood, perhaps more than most, the weight of expectation. Sharing that understanding is leadership." Tamron absorbed it. "Leadership can be lonely," she offered. "How do you balance the need for privacy with the scale of your visibility?" "Privacy isn't absence," he replied. "It's authorship. The difference seems to confuse people." A faint hum rippled through the audience. Tamron inclined her head. "Fair point. Still, some viewers might wonder whether authorship becomes control. For example, the book." Harry exhaled through his nose, a soft laugh that wasn't warm. "We're not doing the book question again, are we? I've addressed it 1,000 times. It was necessary. People read it because it mattered." Tamron didn't flinch. "They did," she agreed. "But because they read it, they also have questions." She kept her tone even, professional. "You've said the book was about healing. Do you feel healed?" "Healing isn't a destination," Harry said, gaze lifting toward the lights. "But I'm certainly ahead of anyone who's still asking if it was worth it." The line landed like a coin tossed to a street musician. Shiny, dismissive. A few in the audience tittered, uncertain whether it was a joke. Tamron's smile tightened 0.5 millimeter. "Let's talk impact then," she said. "Do you think any of your public choices have complicated relationships you might want privately?" "My private relationships," he said, "are private because I choose that." Complication happens when people who aren't part of those relationships try to narrate them on daytime television. The words were velvet-wrapped. The point was sharp. Tamron let the moment expand, then folded it neatly. "Understood. We'll stay with what you do want to narrate. You've criticized the British press and certain palace protocols. Is there anything you wish you'd handled differently?" Harry leaned back, owning the chair. "I handled things exactly as they demanded to be handled. Sometimes truth insists, and when truth insists," Tamron said softly, "do you ever worry it can also wound?" Harry met her eyes. "Truth doesn't wound. Hypocrisy does." Another ripple. The band leader shifted on his stool. A floor manager glanced toward the control room window. Tamron crossed one leg over the other, calm and bodied. "You've spoken beautifully about service," she continued. "Some viewers say they're confused by the tension between service and the commercial side. Streaming deals, Speaking tours, branding. How do you define service now? Harry's smile returned, bright and edged. Service is impact measured by outcomes, not optics. A deal that funds programs is service. I'm not sure why that's difficult. It's a sincere question, Tamron said. People associate royalty with duty, not business, and Tamron, Harry cut in, his voice still soft but suddenly colder. If people are comfortable, it usually means nothing important is changing. Discomfort is the tax of progress. Some audiences don't like paying taxes. A soft "oh" floated from the crowd. Tamron nodded, absorbing the sting without wearing it. One more on that, she said. If discomfort is the tax of progress, how do you respond to those who feel you tax family trust? That sharing private conversations erodes the possibility of reconciliation. He chuckled, the kind that says, we're done pretending. People who worry about my family's trust are seldom in my family. And reconciliation doesn't start with silence from the person harmed. The studio air thinned. It wasn't hostile yet, but the polite scaffolding had begun to creak. Tamron kept her hands folded, the way surgeons do before a precise cut. Let's zoom in, she said. You told an audience last month that institutions rarely apologize first. If an apology did come from press, palace, anyone, what would it need to say? Harry considered, eyes half-lidded in thought or evaluation. It would need to say, we were wrong because we were invested in a version of you that served us. We're sorry we punished you for choosing yourself. Soft applause. Tamron waited for it to fade. And if that apology never come, then I continue choosing myself, he said simply. I've learned to do that better than most. The sentence hung like a banner. Tamron let it flutter, then reached for a new card. We're almost at the break, she said, with a smile that restored the room's pulse. Afterward, I'd love to ask about the specifics of your upcoming projects and a question many viewers sent in about what accountability looks like. When stories are told from one side, Harry's brow ticked. Almost imperceptible. Almost. Happy to educate, he said. The word waited. The band splashed a tasteful chord. Applause lights winked. As the crew moved and microphones were checked, Tamron kept her eyes on him just long enough to register the temperature drop. The segment had begun as a stroll through manicured talking points. Now it felt like a hallway narrowing toward a door neither of them intended to open. They came back from commercial with smiles reset. Tamron thanked the sponsor, the audience, the viewers at home. Her voice was tranquil water over stone. Prince Harry, she began, let's talk accountability, yours and the media's. You've asked for it loudly from others. What does it look like when pointed at you? He tilted his head, almost amused. It looks like outcomes. Programs launched, lives improved. Conversations, like this one, move past the shallow end. And when people ask for accountability on facts, she pressed, still gentle, on names, timelines, receipts, Harry's gaze cooled another degree. People who deserve receipts know where to find them. The audience made a small, involuntary sound, half gasp, half woo. Tamron sat a bit taller. She didn't raise her voice, she sharpened it. Fair, she said. Then let's agree to bring as much clarity as we can, for the folks watching who don't know where to find them. He smiled without warmth. Clarity requires good faith. I hope we have that. Tamron's eyes flickered. Hurt. Frustration. She swallowed both. We always try, she said simply. The cameras drank in the moment. Two practiced professionals, all posture and poise, with a rattle of sabers just under the desk. On the monitors, it looked serene. In the studio, it felt combustible. By the time the floor manager flashed the wrap sign for the segment, nothing had technically exploded. But the fuse glowed bright enough that even the back row could see it. The next questions would decide whether it burned out or burned the set down. The studio returned from commercial with another burst of applause. But the warmth of the first segment had cooled. Tamron Hall's signature poised smile carried her into the next question, though her eyes betrayed a cautious calculation. She had interviewed world leaders and celebrities before, but she could already sense that this conversation was careening toward more dangerous territory. Welcome back, everyone, Tamron said. her voice smooth as ever. "We're here with Prince Harry, discussing his work, his journey, and most importantly, the lessons he's learned along the way." Harry nodded, giving the audience a faint smile that felt more like acknowledgement than gratitude. He leaned back in the plush chair, legs crossed, fingertips pressed together. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. Tamron shuffled her cards. "So, Harry, before the break, you mentioned accountability. Let's dig into that. When you ask for accountability from others, say the press or even the royal family, do you feel you've shown that same accountability yourself? Particularly when it comes to what some describe as contradictions in your narrative." It was a carefully worded question, but Harry's smile froze into something more rigid. "Contradictions?" he repeated, his tone faintly incredulous. "You mean when the media decides to frame my life with headlines they wrote before I even opened my mouth? That's not contradiction, Tamron. That's projection." The audience gave a polite murmur, unsure whether to applaud. Tamron stayed composed. "I hear you. But to be fair, it's not just headlines. People point to moments, for example, the desire for privacy, yet participating in high-profile interviews and projects that put very private matters on the record." Harry chuckled, low and sharp. "Ah, the privacy paradox. How original. Haven't heard that one before?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Let me educate. Privacy means choosing what you share, not surrendering your entire life. If people can't grasp that distinction, it says more about them than it does about me." There was a shift in the audience, some clapping, some glancing at each other. The condescension in his tone hadn't gone unnoticed. Tamron adjusted in her seat, her posture still open, but her smile taut. "Of course, it's a nuanced topic, but don't you think the way you communicate that nuance sometimes gets lost? Perhaps because of the tone?" Harry's brow arched. "Tone? Forgive me, but maybe the issue isn't tone. Maybe it's that people aren't used to someone like me refusing to play along anymore." He leaned forward slightly. "You know, Tamron, I've spent my entire life being told how to smile, what to say, how to behave. If I sound sharp now, it's because I've earned the right not to pander." The audience gasped quietly at the edge in his words. Tamron blinked once, slowly. She had handled testy guests before, but rarely had a royal spoken with such open disdain on her stage. She softened her tone deliberately. "I understand the desire to control your own story. But do you ever worry that in defending yourself so strongly, you risk alienating people who actually want to support you?" Harry's laugh came quick and clipped. "People who want to support me will support me. I don't need to spoon-feed them palatable versions of my life for their comfort. If someone is so fragile that my honesty offends them, perhaps they were never truly supporters to begin with." The studio air tightened. Even those who had clapped earlier now sat more still, as if recalibrating their impression of him. Tamron's lips curved in her professional half-smile, though her eyes had cooled. That's one way to look at it. Another is that people want connection, not correction. Do you think you sometimes underestimate how your words land? Harry tilted his head, almost mockingly. With respect, Tamron, people spend too much time worrying about how words land and not enough time listening to what they actually say. If people misinterpret my intent, that's their burden. The audience reaction this time was muted. No applause, no laughter, just silence. Tamron folded her hands calmly in her lap, every inch the seasoned broadcaster. "Let me ask this then," she said. "If your goal is to heal and move forward, why do so many of your public statements still focus on grievances with your past? Some might say that feels less like healing and more like reopening wounds." Harry's eyes narrowed. "Grievances? Interesting choice of word. I call it truth. If people are uncomfortable with truth, maybe they should ask themselves why the arrogance in his delivery was undeniable now." He sat back again, chin slightly raised, as though daring anyone to disagree. The silence in the audience deepened. Tamron inhaled, steady. Her professionalism held, but the subtle tightening around her mouth signaled that Harry's dismissiveness was cutting closer than he realized. "Well," she said evenly, "our viewers sent in a lot of questions, and one theme that came up often was about family. Do you think there's a future where you reconcile publicly with them, or do you see the distance remaining permanent? Harry's smirk returned, cool and self-satisfied. Reconciliation isn't a performance for the public. It's a process, and frankly, whether the public sees it or not is irrelevant. People are obsessed with my family because it's easier than reflecting on their own. This time, the audience shifted in their seats audibly. A few clapped out of habit, but most stayed silent, sensing that the once relatable prince had slipped into arrogance. Tamron nodded slowly, holding his gaze. I see. That's certainly a strong perspective. Strong, Harry repeated, almost savoring the word. Yes, strong and unapologetic, which I suspect is why I'm here, and why people can't stop talking about me. It was the kind of line meant to dazzle, but it landed like a stone. The polite applause sign faded before the audience could respond. For Tamron, the calculation in her mind was shifting. The questions she had prepared no longer mattered. Something raw, more urgent was building, and though she remained calm, a line inside her had started to burn. The royal smile lingered, but it wasn't charming anymore. It was a challenge. The third segment opened with subdued applause, as if the audience sensed the stakes had shifted. The warmth and cheer from earlier had drained away, leaving only an uneasy hush. Tamron Hall smiled into the camera as she always did, but the set was heavy with tension. Everyone, viewers at home, crew behind the cameras, audience in their seats, felt it. We're back with Prince Harry, Tamron said smoothly, though her voice had an edge of steel beneath it. And we've been having a very candid conversation. Harry leaned back in his chair, one ankle resting casually across the opposite knee. He twirled the microphone cord between his fingers, wearing the smirk of someone who believed he was winning a match no one else realized was happening. Candid is one word for it, he said. I prefer honest. Brutal honesty, if necessary. It's about time people get used to it. A ripple went through the audience, half gasp, half nervous chuckle. Tamron folded her hands in her lap, posture upright. Well, let's continue with honesty then. You've spoken about mental health, family struggles, and your mission to change the system. But some critics argue your advocacy often circles back to your personal grievances. How do you respond to those who say you've made your story bigger than the causes you champion? Harry gave a sharp laugh. Critics. The people who never risked a thing in their lives but love to analyze mine. They don't deserve a response, Tamron. And if you're repeating their words, then maybe you don't either. The audience gasped audibly. Tamron blinked once, her smile faltering for the first time. Still, she pressed on. I asked the question, she said, her tone firmer now, because our viewers want clarity. Do you feel your personal story strengthens your advocacy, or do you think it risks overshadowing it? Harry tilted his head, eyes narrowing as if he were deciding how much contempt to show. My story is the advocacy. Without my experiences, none of these conversations would even exist. People don't tune in to hear generic speeches. They want me. And frankly, Tamron, they need me. The arrogance in his voice rang across the studio like a bell. A few people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. The camera panned to a woman in the second row biting her lip, unsure whether to clap or stay silent. Tamron's jaw tightened, though she kept her voice calm. Some might say that sounds self-important. Some might, Harry replied, flashing a grin. And they'd be right. It is important. And if it centers on me, that's because I'm the one carrying it. The words landed heavy. Tamron's eyes flickered, and for the first time, irritation slipped into her tone. Carrying it alone, she asked? What about your wife, your family, the people who support your foundation? Do they not deserve recognition too? Harry's smile cooled. Of course they do. But let's be honest, they follow my lead. Without me, there's no spotlight, no microphone, no movement. That's just reality. The audience groaned softly, a sound between disbelief and disapproval. The image of humility once associated with Harry was collapsing in real time. Tamron sat a little straighter, her warmth giving way to restraint. That's quite a statement, she said. Let me pivot then. You've often criticized the press, yet you've also relied on them for your platform. At what point does criticism become hypocrisy? Harry's expression hardened. Hypocrisy? Please, that word gets thrown around by people who don't understand leverage. The press created me, yes, but they don't own me. I use them now, not the other way around. There were no laughs this time, no applause. Just silence. Tamron exhaled quietly through her nose, the camera catching the faintest flicker of her patience cracking. So, to be clear, you don't see any contradiction in condemning the press while simultaneously profiting from them? Harry leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low but cutting. Do you see contradiction in hosting a show built on ratings while pretending it's about journalism? We all play the game, Tamron. Some of us just play it better. The jab landed hard. A collective gasp erupted from the crowd. Tamron's lips pressed together, her hands tightening slightly in her lap. For a beat, she said nothing. Then, with calm precision, she replied, I've built my career on respect and integrity. I don't ambush my guests, and I don't insult them. Harry smiled, sharp as a blade. And yet here we are. The word stung. For the first time, Tamron's smile disappeared completely. The cameras caught every second. Her straightened spine, the spark of anger behind her eyes, the momentary stillness of the entire room. Let me ask you something personal then, she said, her voice lower now, almost warning. You've spoken about wanting to protect your family. But by exposing private matters publicly, haven't you endangered those very relationships? How does that align with your values? Harry gave a cold laugh. You're asking the wrong question. The right question is, why should I protect relationships that never protected me? The audience gasped again, louder this time. Someone in the back even muttered, Wow! Tamron's composure cracked just slightly, her brows knitting, her lips pressing into a thin line. That's a painful answer, she said softly. For them and for you. Harry shrugged, unapologetic. Painful, yes, but true. And I won't apologize for truth. The atmosphere was electric now. The air hummed with tension, like static before a storm. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed frozen, unsure if they should intervene or let the moment burn itself out. Tamron leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Truth is powerful, but so is humility. Do you ever ask yourself whether your delivery, the way you speak to people, might be costing you the very empathy you say you want? Harry's smirk deepened, his voice dripping with superiority. Tamron, empathy is overrated. Respect is what matters. And if people can't respect me for speaking plainly, then their empathy was worthless to begin with. The audience fell into stunned silence once more. The polite applause that had filled earlier segments was gone. Tamron drew a slow breath. For a moment, she looked down at her notes, then back up at Harry. Her tone was calm, but beneath it lay something raw. Maybe, she said, but respect has to be earned. And I think you may be forgetting that Harry leaned back, arms folded across his chest, his smirk unwavering. Or maybe the world just isn't ready for me. The arrogance was absolute. And in that moment, everyone knew the storm was about to break. The air in the studio was thick enough to choke. For over 30 minutes, Tamron Hall had remained composed, her professionalism unshaken, even as Prince Harry turned every question into a platform for arrogance. But now, as he leaned back with his arms folded, smirking like a man untouchable, something in her finally cracked. She leaned forward, her voice steady but edged with steel. You know, Harry, you keep talking about truth and respect. But what I hear is entitlement. What I see is a man so wrapped in his own grievances that he can't recognize when he's lost the room. The audience gasped, a murmur of shock rippling across the seats. For the first time, Harry's smirk faltered. Lost the room? He scoffed, trying to laugh it off. Tamron, with respect, the room has never mattered to me. I've spent my life performing for rooms that were never satisfied. I'm not here to win approval. Tamron's eyes locked on his, no smile left on her face. No, you're here to lecture, to dismiss, to act like every question is beneath you. And frankly, I'm done with it. The silence was electric. Even the crew froze, their eyes darting between host and guest. Harry leaned forward, his tone sharp. Done? Because I didn't bow to your questions? Because I didn't give you the sound bites you wanted? Tamron shook her head, her voice rising. No, Harry, because every answer you've given has been dripping with arrogance. You sit here mocking the press, mocking the audience, mocking me, while pretending it's all about service. But let's be honest, this isn't service. This is ego. The audience erupted in applause, breaking their silence at last. Harry's face flushed, his jaw tightening. You don't know me, he shot back, his voice cold. You don't know what I've survived. Tamron didn't flinch. You're right, I don't. But I do know arrogance when I see it. I do know the difference between a man sharing his truth and a man hiding behind his title to avoid accountability. Her words cut like glass. Harry shifted in his seat, visibly unsettled now. Tamron pressed on, her tone unrelenting. You're not a working royal anymore. You chose to leave, and yet you carry yourself as though the world still owes you reverence. But this stage isn't Buckingham Palace. This is my show. And in my house, respect goes both ways. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Harry's eyes flickered with anger. Are you suggesting I don't deserve respect? He demanded. I'm saying respect isn't a birthright, Tamron shot back. It's earned. And the way you've spoken tonight? You've done nothing to earn it. The words hit harder than any prepared question could have. Harry opened his mouth, then closed it again, his confidence faltering for the first time. Tamron leaned back in her chair, her decision clear. I think this interview is over. The crowd gasped. Harry blinked, stunned. Excuse me? You heard me, she said firmly. Prince or not, I don't allow guests to sit here and belittle me or this audience. You want to lecture people? Write another book, but you won't do it on my stage. Security, please show our guest out. The audience erupted, some cheering, some gasping in disbelief. Two stagehands moved toward the set, though Harry stood before they reached him. His face was tight with fury, his jaw clenched. This is outrageous, he hissed. You'll regret treating me this way. Tamron didn't move. No, Harry. What's outrageous is thinking the rules don't apply to you. Goodbye. The crowd applauded, a mix of relief and catharsis. Cameras followed as Harry stormed off the stage, ripping off his microphone and tossing it onto the chair with a sharp flick of his wrist. He didn't look back. When the studio door slammed behind him, Tamron turned to the audience, her composure restored, her voice calm once more. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes conversations take turns we don't expect. But one thing I promise you on this show, we will always value respect, no matter who sits in that chair. The audience leapt to their feet in thunderous applause. The band played over the noise and the credits began to roll. What began as a routine daytime interview had ended in chaos. Prince Harry storming off, Tamron Hall standing her ground, and television history capturing every moment. The royal had come looking for control. Instead, he walked away stripped of it. And that's how one of the most explosive daytime interviews came to an end. Prince Harry storming off, and Tamron Hall proving that respect on her stage is not optional. What do you think? Did Tamron go too far, or was she right to finally call him out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable stories, and stay tuned because the next showdown might be even bigger.